There was something eerily rhythmic about it. Every night, like clockwork, 2:07 a.m. arrived, and with it, silence. A silence so deep it swallowed the world. That's when she disappeared. Not a minute before, not a second later. Amelia vanished into nothingness at 2:07 a.m. Thomas noticed it first, not because he was observant but because he was in love. Deep, hopelessly, helplessly in love with Amelia Green. They had met just 6 months earlier at a bookstore tucked between a rundown laundromat and a bakery that always smelled of cinnamon. She had been standing in the horror section, running her fingers along the spine of an old Shirley Jackson novel, and he'd worked up the nerve to ask if she believed in ghosts. She had turned to him with those ocean-gray eyes and smiled like she'd heard the question 100 times. "Only the kind that follow you home," she'd said, and Thomas had fallen for her right then and there. It wasn't long before they moved in together. A small apartment above an antique shop, where the floor creaked when the wind blew and the radiator sounded like a ghost whispering through pipes. It was charming in a weirdly gothic kind of way, perfect for someone like Amelia, who wore vintage clothes and spoke in poems. Everything was perfect, until it started. It was a Thursday when Thomas first noticed the bed was empty at dawn. He thought she'd just gone to the kitchen, maybe couldn't sleep, but when he walked out, she wasn't there. Her phone was on the table, her robe draped across the couch. The front door was still bolted shut from the inside. Then she walked in from the hallway, barefoot, eyes glazed, and said, "Did you hear it?" "Hear what?" he asked. But she just shook her head and went back to bed. After that, it became a pattern. Every night, Thomas would wake up to find her gone. Always at 2:07 a.m. He started setting alarms, staying awake just to watch her. And every night, without fail, her body would jolt slightly at exactly 2:07. Then she'd stand, walk out of the room, and vanish down the hallway. First, he followed. But every time he turned the corner, she was gone. No sound, no trace. He even set up cameras. The footage showed her rising from bed, walking into the hall. Then static. Every night, the same. He tried to confront her, but Amelia never remembered leaving. In the morning, she'd laugh it off like he was joking. "Are you filming me in my sleep now?" she'd teased. "That's creepy, babe." She didn't believe him, or maybe she didn't want to. Thomas became obsessed. He printed out screenshots, marked times, mapped out where she might be going. He contacted doctors, sleep specialists, even a hypnotist. No one could explain it. The only consistent thing was the time, 2:07 a.m. It was always that. Then came the night he followed her all the way outside. It was raining. Not hard, just enough to make the streetlights blur like tears. She walked barefoot through puddles, her white nightgown clinging to her legs. He followed close, heart pounding, phone in hand. She turned corners like she'd done it 1,000 times. Past the bakery, past the bookstore where they met, into the alley behind the antique shop. And then, nothing, she turned the corner and vanished. Thomas rounded it half a second later and she was gone. No footsteps, no door, just wet pavement and a flickering light. He called her name. Nothing. He ran home, panicked, ready to call the police. She was already in bed, fast asleep, her hair damp. The next morning she was different, quiet, nervous, like something inside her knew more than she was letting on. He pressed her, pleaded. She just looked at him, lips trembling, and whispered, "Do you think people can be borrowed?" "What?" She blinked like she'd said too much. "Never mind." After that, the pattern got worse. She started waking up with bruises, strange ones, thin lines across her arms, finger-shaped shadows on her hips. One night she screamed in her sleep so loud the neighbors knocked on the door. That night, Thomas stayed awake the whole time. He held her hand, whispered to her, told her she was safe. But at 2:07 a.m., she vanished anyway. Right before his eyes. Not walked out. Not faded. Just gone. One blink she was there, next blink. Gone. Thomas screamed, searched the apartment, called the police, called everyone. She returned 2 hours later, just after 4 a.m., standing in the hallway with blood on her nightgown. He demanded answers. She stared at him like he was a stranger. Then she said, "I saw myself die." The hospital couldn't explain it. No trauma, no drugs, no signs of abuse. The blood wasn't hers. They checked everything. And still 207 came again. And again. And again. Thomas stopped sleeping. He became gaunt, his eyes sunken with dread. He scoured books on astral projection, time loops, sleepwalking, demonic possession. Nothing explained why his fiancée disappeared every night for exactly 113 minutes and returned just before sunrise. Then he found the journal, hidden under a loose floorboard in the hallway. Amelia's handwriting, only it was darker, rougher. The entries were dated years before they met. Asterisk asterisk, it happened again. 207. I saw him again. He says I don't belong here. The mirror version of me won't stop smiling. He took me to the other side again. It's cold there. The air smells like iron. She's dying. But I don't know which one is real. The last entry was written just 2 nights ago. Even though Thomas had watched her throw her old journals away months ago, he confronted her with it. She broke down crying. "I'm not me," she whispered. "Not always." Thomas held her. He didn't care. He loved her, no matter what part of her this was. But that night, she didn't return. 2:07 came. She vanished. 3:00 came. Nothing. 4:00. Still gone. Sunrise. Gone. Thomas called the police again, begged them to look for her. They searched the alley, the shops, even drained a storm drain nearby. Nothing. He waited 2 days. 3 then she returned. Only, it wasn't her. Her face was the same, but her eyes were wrong. Colder, sharper, like someone had put on a skin suit and tried to fake her laugh. Thomas tried to pretend, to believe it was still Amelia. But she didn't remember the bookstore. She didn't remember their first date. She didn't remember his middle name. And then one night, while she thought he was asleep, she whispered into the mirror, "He doesn't suspect a thing." That night, Thomas packed a bag and left. But he couldn't escape her. She followed. Not just one version. Asterisk asterisk, many asterisk asterisk. He saw her face on the train, in the background of a news broadcast, walking behind strangers. Always at 2:07. She was everywhere. And yet, nowhere. And then, months later, he received a letter. No return address. Just 2 words on the front. Asterisk asterisk. Help me. Inside was a photograph. Of her, tied to a chair in a room filled with clocks. All frozen at 2:07. Thomas stared at it for hours. Then he turned it over. Asterisk asterisk. Only you can bring me back. He didn't know what to do. But he knew one thing. That wasn't Amelia sleeping beside him every night. That he had to find her. The real her. So he set his alarm for 2:06 a.m. Waited in the dark. And when she turned to vanish, he grabbed her hand. The world split open. There was screaming. Not hers, his. As his body was yanked through light, color, noise, he saw 1,000 versions of her. Crying. Dying. Watching, then, darkness. When he woke up, he was in a room old, cold, with clocks on every wall. And Amelia was there. The real one. Tears ran down her cheeks. "You came," she whispered. "I never left," he said. They held each other as the clocks all ticked to 2:07, and for the first time, the minute hand moved forward. She didn't vanish, neither did he. But someone else did. In a quiet apartment above an antique shop, a different Amelia rose from bed, looked into the mirror, and smiled. Thomas didn't know how long they held each other, minutes, hours, days. Time felt different in this place. The clocks ticked on, some forward, some backward, others spinning in endless loops. But none of it mattered. Amelia was real, warm, human, herself. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered into his chest. He stroked her hair, breathing her in. "I didn't care what I had to go through. I was never going to stop looking." But relief is a fragile thing, because it didn't last. A cold wind swept through the room, and with it came whispers. They didn't speak a language Thomas understood, but he felt the meaning. "You've broken the contract. Amelia pulled back, her face pale. They know you're here. Who? Thomas asked. The borrowers, she said. The ones who take versions of us when the veil is thinnest. That's what 207 is. The seam between worlds. Before he could respond, the clocks began to scream. Not chime, scream. Their hands spun wildly, glass faces cracking. A black mist seeped from between the gears, thick and crawling, like it had a will of its own. The room shook, and walls peeled away to reveal a nightmarish landscape outside. Buildings upside down, skies the color of bruises, reflections walking without mirrors. They're coming? Amelia said, grabbing his arm. Where do we go? There's only one way out, she said, pulling him down a narrow hallway that hadn't been there before. It was lit with flickering candles, some upright, some floating. The walls whispered their names. Behind them, something followed. Not footsteps, not claws, something worse. They ran. Down corridors that bent sideways. Through a room filled with television screens showing different versions of Thomas. Crying, laughing, dying. Amelia yanked him past a version of her screaming behind glass, blood pouring from her eyes. He had no idea where they were going. But she did. They reached a black door with a gold handle shaped like an hourglass. Amelia pressed her palm against it. Her skin glowed faintly, and the door shuddered open. What is this place? He gasped. The crosspoint, she said. It leads back, but only if we both go through at the exact same time. Otherwise, one of us stays. Forever. Without hesitation, Thomas took her hand. Then let's go. Together. They stepped forward. But something grabbed Amelia from behind. It was her. Another version. This one smiling too wide, eyes black, whispering in her ear. You don't deserve this life. I do. Thomas lunged, pulling both of them toward the door. Let her go. The ground beneath them cracked open. Amelia's arm slipped from his grasp for half a second, but in that moment, he chose that he let go of the doppelganger and held tighter to his Amelia. They fell through the doorway, tumbling through starlight and screams, and landed hard on the floor of their apartment. Everything was silent. Thomas gasped. The clock on the wall read 2:08 a.m. Amelia was there, whole, alive. She looked at him, then around the room. The apartment was the same, but something felt lighter. The air no longer carried the weight of something watching. The hallway didn't stretch longer than it should. It's over, she said softly. He nodded. They stayed up till morning, wrapped in each other, waiting to see if the nightmare would return. He never did. Days passed. Then weeks. No more vanishing, no more bruises, no more static on the cameras. But then, on a quiet Thursday, Thomas received an envelope under their door. No name. No address. Just a single note inside. One day, the clock will strike again. He looked at Amelia, who had been laughing just moments before at something on TV. She noticed his face fall. What is it? She asked. He folded the paper and smiled. Nothing important. But that night, he double-locked every door and set the alarm for 2:06 a.m., just in case. Because in this world, time never truly lets go.